Now, without further delay, I would like to give the floor to our moderator today, Dr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento, who is the Managing Director of Digitalization, Technology and Agribusiness at UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Dr. Calzadilla, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I'm so pleased to be today with all of you, making the fourth industrial revolution work for Africa. A very ambitious title, but it is very important that we talk about it. We think, first of all, I would like to thank UNECA, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, with whom we are organizing this event. And also, I would like to highlight that central to this discussion, we have the digital transformation strategy for Africa. And before I introduce our distinguished panel, and we are very pleased at so early time in the morning that they are here with us, I would like to briefly remark about some backgrounds on digitalization. Globally, for several years, we know that digital manufacturing technologies have been disrupting the landscape. We have heard about all these new technologies that were coming about in a very accelerated manner: 3D printing, artificial intelligence, advanced robotics, industrial Internet of Things, blockchain, and so many more. The transition to this digital manufacturing, and we are talking about the digitalization of the industries, presents also immense opportunities to increase the efficiency and safety on industrial production, to move towards a circular economy, to create new industrial sectors, and hopefully new employment opportunities. We really believe when this will be unleashing, this will bring a lot of employment opportunities, and the deployment of these innovations also carries out the potential to bring us back on track in achieving the 2030 agenda. But also at the time that we see some hope in the potential to receive help for recovery from the digital technologies, we also must be aware of the hazards, and we must work against them. And it is the role of governments, it is the role of the multilateral systems, of the regional systems, that we have an increasing digital divide. We have automation of labor, and we have to make sure that everybody benefits in a similar manner from this. And this is why this slogan, making 4IR work for all. Globally, the digital divide is wide as ever. The UNIDO IDR 2020 found that just 10 economies account for 90% of global patents and 70% of exports associated with digital technologies, while 88 countries, many of which are in Africa, have little or no involvement in the use or production. We must also act to ensure that some groups are not further marginalized. We must pay particular attention to MSMEs, women, young people. MSMEs face significant obstacles to acquiring advanced technologies, to gaining access to credit, accessing to skills, training opportunities. Women are very underrepresented in STEM sectors, with less than 30% of STEM researchers worldwide being female. Regionally, and in Africa, we must sure that also nobody is being behind. We have seen also very interesting innovations already. These examples are not so fresh, but M-Pesa, these are innovations that came from digital entrepreneurs. The use of drones has been happening first in Africa and in many areas, and now it's widespread. We must also, we have AfriLabs, but we must make sure that we put in place the enabling environment to have not anecdotal examples, but this must succeed in a wide scale. Within the framework of African Industrialization Week 2020, this was in November, UNIDO and UNECA also co-organized the first discussion on digital transformation. And we gained some very relevant inputs to the role of multilateral organization in stimulating enhanced collaboration between public and business sector and the innovation ecosystem stakeholders to achieve what we want to get inclusive, gender-responsive, sustainable digital transformation of the African industries, and especially in the AFCTA context. Central to these efforts is the creation of digital policy frameworks, regional cooperation, multi-stakeholder partnerships, digital skills, and the enhancement of digital infrastructure. Today, we will discuss the key priorities of the implementation of the digital transformation strategy for Africa and how this can contribute to strengthening policies and normative frameworks, building institutional capacities, and supporting the digital transformation of African firms. Well, before we start our panel, we will begin with a keynote from Her Excellency, Ms. Stella Ndabeni Abrahams, the Minister of Communication and Digital Technologies of South Africa. To give some background, Ms. Ndabeni Abrahams has extensive experience in-depth knowledge in the field of digitalization and communication technologies. She holds a Commonwealth Telecommunication Organization diploma in telecommunications and management systems and a certificate in telecommunications and policy and regulation management from Wits University. For our keynote session, please welcome Her Excellency Ms. Stella Ndabeni Abrahams, Minister of Communication and Digital Technology of South Africa.
Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, allow me to take this platform a couple of days after the world has just celebrated the International Day of Women on the 8th of March. I have since addressed a number of national and international gatherings dedicated to celebrating the achievements of women against all odds globally. In times like this, we are forced to look back in history and remember those women who immortalized themselves by their selfless deeds in the services of humankind. Today, I have not come to sing praises to these great women, yet the temptation is high to mention but few, lest we forget that it is on their shoulders that we stand and see deep into the future we are currently shaping. At a time when science had not developed to conquer some of the most vicious diseases, Florence Nightingale braved her way and registered successes no man did. It took Mother Teresa to reach out to those who faced imminent death from HIV and AIDS, poverty, and other vicious diseases. We too, as Africans, have registered names in the list of the immortals. It was Winnie Madikizela Mandela who stood up when the entire leadership of South African liberation movement was jailed, exiled, or murdered, and she faced the most brutal persecution under apartheid. She prevailed and saw a free South African born. Similarly, it was Charlotte Maxeke who defied all norms of her time to become the first African woman to have a university degree in South Africa and grew to be recognized as a pioneer of gender equality. Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala has just made history by being the first African and woman to be the Director General of the World Trade Organization. Program Director, these are the stories that we must continue to tell for posterity to know that it took sweat, blood, and sometimes life to make the world a better place to live in. Today, as I come to talk about a subject very close to my heart, the fourth industrial revolution in the context of Africa, the beginning of many things that have become strangers to Africa today. Allow me to attempt to address some of the vexed questions confronting our continent and indeed confronting the world. The advent of coronavirus pandemic superimposed 4IR as an unavoidable imperative of our lives henceforth. It is in this context that we as African leaders must without fail answer the question of how our countries plan to support the digital transformation of our firms, scale up indigenous innovations and technologies, whilst empowering SMEs, women, youth, and disadvantaged groups, including the informal sector, and of course, when necessarily, by leveraging on the digital skills. As the continent, we are viewed as followers of other nations. I dare say, time has come for Africa to occupy its rightful place amongst nations of the world as an equal. Not only the human species originated from Africa, but science and technology started here in Africa, and a number of artifacts bear testimony to this. The 4IR affords Africa the second chance to leapfrog the continent. Program Director, the current population of Africa is estimated at 1,347 billion and expected to reach 2.4 billion by 2050. This presents a potential source of data to feed innovation in technologies, as well patently valuable emerging marketplace. The growing number of businesses use cases specific to African consumers that makes the application of 4IR a critical necessity on our continent through the rollout of future-proof necessary digital infrastructure, creation of an enabling environment for SMMEs, and development of 4IR-related skill sets amongst its populace, in particular women, youth, and people with disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, an example in supporting local innovation and entrepreneurship, AfriLabs, which is a network organization, supports its community members to partner with national governments, regional bodies, local and international non-governmental policy advocates in order to seed policies that help nurture innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. This is according to the latest mapping done by GSMA. The top 5 ecosystem cities by the number of active hubs are Lagos, which is in Nigeria, Cape Town in South Africa, Nairobi in Kenya, Cairo in Egypt, and Accra in Ghana. The average age of these hubs is about 5 years, which indicates that Africa's technology hubs community is still young and unincumbent. On digital skills training, entrepreneurs in Africa often lack the required support to develop successful businesses. We have since developed a national digital and future skills strategy, which targets provision of digital skills to more than 2 million people in the next 5 years. This strategy envisions the realization of digital transformation where people, the economy, and society benefit from enhanced levels of digital skills as we move into a digital future anchored in agility, creativity, and problem solving. One of the imperatives of our era is to have the agility to keep pace with the changes around us, and it is in this context that the African states have to partake practical steps leveraging 4IR to bridge the digital skills gap and the digital gender divide. Focusing on the following areas will propel Africa's women and youth and the entire citizenry to participate in the digital economy. And these are the key drivers. Soft skills such as communication, critical thinking, and creative thinking to support women. Secondly, technical skills in the likes of coding, data science, blockchain, machine learning, and others that require us to collaborate with the industries in order to solicit industry-specific demands. The third one being entrepreneurship, which is an area we neglect as our focus is mostly on preparing for employment than creating an environment where innovation, creativity, curiosity, and risk-taking are encouraged. Deliberate effort to nurture entrepreneurship addresses 3 challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality concurrently. This is why the SMMEs must receive our support. One of the coincidences which should be tortured to the maximum by the African countries in order to position themselves is the convergence of the 4th Industrial Revolution and the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, in January, 2012 in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia, the 18th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of Heads of States and Governments of the African Union, under the theme Boosting Intra-African Trade, endorsed an action plan for boosting intra-African trade and agreed on a roadmap for the establishment of an Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. This decision is the bedrock for the realization of digital transformation of the continent, as well as establishing a flourishing African ICT sector ready to embrace the potentials of Industry 4.0. The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement will create the world's greatest free trade area measured by the number of participating countries. This will bring Africa's 1.3 billion population together under a combined GDP estimated at $3.4 trillion as captured in the World Bank report. The agreement further holds exponential opportunities for cross-boundary partnerships amongst African states, thus enabling them to fast-track the realization of digital transformation through exchange of research policy and regulatory frameworks that are data-driven to promote better government decision-making. It is through localization and industrialization that African countries will be able to escape the stranglehold of being consumers of goods manufactured by other countries, yet made from the raw materials from Africa. This is the time to build Africa in order to buy Africa. We have also begun to take steps towards the implementation of the AU Digital Transformation Strategy, whilst also playing an important role in the development of the 4IR strategy framework for Africa, and of course, developing guidelines for the continent, which underpins these key critical technologies. This and other continentally led projects by the AU have the potential to eradicate the current challenges at fore and offer opportunities to accelerate digital transformation, whilst enabling series of opportunities for the African continent. We are promoting socio-economic development, which includes an inclusive, gender-responsive, and sustainable 4IR on the African continent. This is the duty cast upon the shoulders of the leadership of Africa today. As an attached, active, and passionate activist for gender-responsive policies, I believe that digital transformation can never be realized in Africa, where women and the girl child do not have a seat at the table. Gone are the days where women are relegated to the status of the subhumans. Recognition of women's abilities will unlock hitherto untapped potential of the world. The novelty of the 4IR to the African continent in and by itself presents an opportunity from the start to forge synergies for both national and regional policies and normative frameworks that will not only enhance cooperation, but will embed digital transformation in the capacity of African governments to deliver digital services and develop indigenous digital solutions to address local challenges. Women and the girl child, who are in the majority, should spearhead the inclusion in the digital transformation of the African continent. This includes demanding that implementation plans on Africa's technological development cannot be silent on the particular generic needs of women in their conceptualization. Being cognizant of the fact that none of us acting in isolation will win in the present world of the Internet of Things. Thus, African countries must begin to build institutional capacities and create innovation ecosystems conducive to improved cooperation, partnerships, knowledge sharing, technology transfer, and investment. A case in point, ladies and gentlemen, is Kenya's Silicon Savannah, a clear sign of Kenya's strength in establishing efficient digital ecosystems. African countries should partner together in modeling a similar technological ecosystem. In closing, fellow participants, allow me to quote Martin Luther King Jr., who said, and I quote, "In this period of transition and growing social change, there is a dire need for leaders who are calm yet positive, leaders who avoid the extremes of hot-headedness and Uncle Tomism. The agency of the hour calls for leaders of wise judgment and sound integrity, leaders not in love with money, but in love with humanity. Leaders who can subject their particular egos to the greatness of the cause. And this is the challenge that we must all take as the current leadership." Once more, thank you so much, Program Director, for an opportunity to engage with the participants and yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was a very inspiring a keynote speech, and it was so vast. It touched upon so many aspects. I'm really impressed how you focused on the COVID-19, on skills, and something that is very important. 4IR Leapfrog for Development is an opportunity, but there is a huge task list to be done in order to build this enabling environment. So a huge thank you once again to Ms. Stella Ndabeni Abrams, the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies of South Africa. We continue our conversation today, and I would like to introduce our panel. It is very early in the morning, but we have a fireside chat now. We are pleased to welcome Her Excellency, Dr. Amani Abu Said. And Dr. Amani Abu Said is the Commissioner for Infrastructure, Energy and ICT of the African Union. Welcome. Her Excellency Amani Abu Said is the twice elected African Union Commissioner in charge of Infrastructure, Energy and ICT. For more than 30 years, Dr. Abu Said has served in international organizations such as the African Development Bank, where she managed the largest operational portfolio and implemented national and continental multi-sectoral development programs, including implementing the world's largest solar power plant. Dr. Abu Said sets an example for women in STEM, and we heard it just now. This is a key priority, and we need also more women in leadership and decision-making positions, and she is a role model for that, and is a long named and recognized as a champion of gender equality and women empowerment. So welcome to today for this discussion. I would also like to introduce Ms. Bogolo Joy Kenewendo, Managing Director of Kenewendo Advisory and former Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry of Botswana. Her Excellency Ms. Bogolo Kenewendo is an African economist and a non-resident fellow at the Center for Global Development. She is also a member of the United Nations Secretary General high-level panel on digital cooperation and group on financing for development, a member of the World Economic Forum, Global Future Council for Global Public Goods in the Fourth Economic Revolution, and also a WEF Young Global Leader. Additionally, she is a co-founder and the chairperson of Molaya Nosi Trust and sits on several corporate boards. We have a wonderful panel this morning. So let's get started with the discussion. I'm very keen to hear our panelists, and let me start with a question to Dr. Abu Said, Her Excellency. You have ample experience, we just heard, in terms of establishing multi-sectoral programs, strengthen multi-stakeholder partnerships in Africa. How can regional cooperation policies and normative frameworks promote the creation of an enabling environment for Africa innovations to access new markets and trade agreements? The floor is yours, please.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, moderator, for this introduction. allow me at the outset to say how really pleased and honored to be on this distinguished panel, and also to see that in a way I think women on this panel outnumber men. It's not by accident, and it's not anecdotal. You'll find actually that for us in Africa, very often women really now are getting their rightful place in many leadership roles in infrastructure in general, but especially also in digitalization. And that's what we want to see. Maybe it's not enough. Maybe we should continue, of course, on this trend. But again, it's a very good sign. We've heard it before from Her Excellency how Africa, is endowed with many resources, and the best of which and the most valuable resource that we have is our young people. And our young people being, the source of energy and creativity, especially at this age when really the main driver of the economies now is creativity, because we are all, especially since COVID-19, shifting into what is called the digital economy. The digital economy has proven to all of us beyond any question that digitalization is the infrastructure of the 21st century. And we do all have to make and do the necessary efforts to make sure to make it work for us in Africa. Because as I said, with all these young people that we're having and the potential and the ideas and the creativities they have, we stand to have a fantastic opportunity to leapfrog and to make this COVID-19 crisis work for us in Africa and turn it into a true opportunity for Africa and African people. Now, of course, when we say Africa, it's in a way misleading, because Africa is also made of 55 countries, 55 cultures, 55 levels of economic progress, 55 regulations, 55 policies. This is not in itself, and especially for the African Union, this is a major hindrance. Hindrance because our aim at the African Union is a united Africa, is a prosperous Africa, and an integrated Africa. So one of the main drivers, or one of the main important pillars for us in Africa to make it, among many other things, this integrated Africa is also to create what we call the single digital market, in order also to create this economy of scale, to harmonize our policies and regulations, and to make, as I said, digitalization work for Africa. So for Africans to deal with other Africans, but also for Africa to deal with the world as one, and to create this immense and huge space that is and these unified or harmonized regulations that would be attractive also for investment, especially that what we've seen since COVID, the investments in digitalizations have tripled. So from 2.3 trillion, now it's almost 7 trillion investments, in digital economy. So this is how important it becomes, and we stand really to benefit a lot from these investments and also from the technologies that come with it. And in that sense, one of the important things that we are working on at the African Union is the harmonization of policies and regulations to ensure that this single digital market works for Africa. And I'm happy to say that some regions in Africa have already started. You will find this happening in East Africa. You'll find it happening in West Africa region. And what we want is that to see the whole Africa is part of one digital market. The second is aware of these different levels of or to avoid the anecdotal examples, like you said in your introduction very early on of the panel, and it was mentioned by Her Excellency the Minister, is the digital transformation strategy, which again aims at creating one strategy for the continent that is cognizant of the different levels of or the progress in digitalization in each country, but it aims for all of us to move together, to move with maybe along different paths, I mean, each within their own level, but to move together and to put, clear targets along the way. And this is what happened early. The strategy was adopted in January 2020. We didn't know about the COVID then, but it provided also a very opportune fuel for our work, what we did in 2020, what we continue now. So we are pushing a lot in the areas of e-health, e-education, e-commerce, digital ID, and so many other components of the strategy. But again, it proved that digital and digitalization has worked, in marvelous ways and continue to do during this during the crisis. I mean, especially the early, whether it's diagnosis, tracking, and even now, I mean, the vaccination in most of our countries, to register is through an app, a digital app, and it does not stop here. And I see people always talk about digital as if it's only the e-commerce or the M-Pesa. No, digital is everything, and it's within the continent. We have again fantastic examples of how this digital economy has worked for us. We are having what it's called now. I mean, the consumers becoming also producers through buying and selling on the internet. It's a peer-to-peer activity, and it has been working, especially, and doubled and tripled under the since COVID. We have the mini grids that are paid for through mobile money, and again, a producer can sell the excess energy within the same village, and they become what is called now prosumers. So they are producers and consumers at the same time. The gig economy, and especially since COVID, of course, with the displacement and or the stop of many activities, many engaged in what is called the gig economy, so as to part-time jobs, things like Uber and Kareem, and there are various examples across Africa, of these temporary jobs. So all of this, all of these are good examples, but I want to stop at the challenges, and I mentioned maybe one challenge being, the different speed with which we embrace, or we are embracing, the digitalization, the different levels of economic development in our continent. And I heard very much Her Excellency talk about the divide, the gender divide, but I also want to talk about the rural-urban divide. And that is extremely important in the case of Africa. So it's not just that the women are disadvantaged when it comes to skills or owning a smart mobile than men, but also you will see the investments in digitalization, connectivity are geared to the urban areas, and the rural areas are disadvantaged. This is serious, and as I said, maybe last year provided us with the firepower when we were talking to our governments, to ensure to push more for more investments into also rural areas, and to create maybe incentives in terms of tariffication for rural areas to ensure that they are connected fast enough, and also with the reasonable prices. We cannot treat urban and rural the same, knowing how different they are economically on this continent. And STEM, yes, when you introducing me, you talked about STEM, Ersin talked about STEM. STEM is the basic, for any progress happening in digitalization. If we want, and that's what we want, to be not only consumers of digital services and products and technology, but also to be producers of digital technology. So STEM is very important. Now, we also want to be careful because since COVID, there has been a serious setback for women and girls when it comes to education in general. So among many other things, I mean, if we talk about divide and gender divide, now COVID, I mean, that's what we're trying to fight as well, and to make sure that now as vaccination progresses, as gradually our economies globally, but also in Africa, are opening up, and there's some kind, of resuming work, that women and girls go back to school and they go back to STEM. It's very important not to miss out on this opportunity or to allow for the crisis to work against us. As I said, it is a fantastic opportunity for the continent if well grasped, and it is being, as I said, especially under the African Union, is being pushed to the fore in all sectors. So be it in trade, especially for the free trade area, be it in energy, the smart grids and the smart producer, being in even airlines. And yesterday I was discussing with air transport operators how the digital passes, how the touchless technologies in airports work for us in Africa, and also to make the experience safe and seamless. So we are moving very fast. I know the challenges are huge, and they are huge, but we also are determined to make this fantastic opportunity of digitalization and to turn a crisis as huge and severe as COVID-19 work for Africa to leapfrog, and I thank you.
So thank you very much. Also, so rich. I would like to pick only on one element which you mentioned that was had not fallen before: rural, urban, and you are right. And we have seen in the case of Asia economies, and particularly in China, they had the access, and it has happened so much in the rural area thanks to them being able. But it is impossible to something to happen. This Taobao system, the villages, the markets, through e-commerce, the rural area started to integrate economically. But you are completely right. No infrastructure, no accessible connectivity. It is not only about the physical accessibility of the infrastructure, but then also of the pricing. Thank you so much. Impossible to take more on such a rich contribution. Let me move on, and let's get some contribution for the southern part of Africa. Ms. Kenewendo, it is crucial that the African industry advances its inclusive and gender responsive in sustainable digital transformation. Now, following on the topic of normative and policy frameworks, and you are part of the digital cooperation framework by the UN, what are the capacities and tools policy making in Africa should be equipped with to map and monitor the digital transformation of the industry?
Right.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and a very good morning to everyone joining us this morning. It is an honor to be joining you in this panel, especially with Her Excellence, both Her Excellencies this morning. I think we already have, to respond to your question, we already have the capacities and the tools in policy making in Africa for digital transformation. It is really not a question of policies or strategies, because those are excellent, and we have seen those even at a regional and continental level being drafted, being world-class. The question is really what do we need to do in order to implement those policies and the strategies, because there is so much room to improve. The dividends of digital efforts in Africa will be a lot more higher than in other regions, and they require a much more concerted effort and stronger pursuit. And this conversation of digital transformation really reminds me of diversification. And there is only one thing I can say about that. Your ambitions of diversification, your ambitions of digital transformation need to be backed up. And this is one area in particular that we're going to need governments to be very deliberate in and be very interventionist and copy, if you will, in the continent from Europe and from the US. And we know that at the turn of the century, with the becoming of digitalization in the US government invested so much capital into startups like Compaq, like Intel, like Apple, and also invested a lot in the internet itself. And this is something that we're going to need to do in the continent if we want to see our aspirations of digital transformation happen. Because once again, it's not just a matter of countries providing an enabling environment, but it's countries and governments being willing to be the first movers and the first risk takers to provide that space where maybe private financing does not want to go into in the beginning. But when we at that digital divide, say, okay, invest in Airbnb or something similar to Airbnb or something similar to Amazon, we also have to look at what our problems are here. And innovation has to meet the needs of the continent. And innovation, digitalization is not just about being on the internet. It's also about looking at those solutions that are online and that are able to reach people in the rural areas, because as Her Excellency rightfully said, a digital divide is not only about rich countries, but it's also within a rural and urban. How do we bridge that divide? We know already that we have a very high mobile penetration. Let us use that technology to bolster more movement in the industrialization space, in sharing information, because what we want, the starting point really in digitization is having the information, understanding how one can run their business, how one can efficiently transform their businesses and their economy, and then take it from there into implementation. But the key thing here, moderator, as I started, is we need to back up our ambitions of digital transformation with capital. And I'm so happy that we are discussing this issue on the backs of the Conference of Ministers of Finance, who are the wallet holders, the purse holders, and need to see ICT infrastructure as one of the key infrastructures that go hand in hand with utilities, so water and power, because from now on, COVID has shown us ICT infrastructure will become a utility as well. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you so much, and thank you for putting so passionately the emphasis on capital. And yes, the meeting of the Ministers of Finance is going on, but another question is how to mobilize investment, how attract increased also private investment. Dr. Abu Said, the creation of a secure digital single market is one of the main objectives of the digital transformation strategy, and therefore the question in this regard is, how can the initiative as such attract more investment, fostering job creation and contribution to the digital gap in the continent? But how can we make sure that this critical mass of capital moves into the continent? The floor is yours.
I will start with what you said, security. Yes, I mean, as we digitalize, I mean, there are two tracks. That one track is the opportunities, the enabling environment, the enabling finance, and the second track should be, and it is, how to ensure that the data that the data is owned by Africa, that the systems, that whatever we put in place is secure and safe for everyone to engage in these wonderful opportunities. And It is not an accident that already since 2014, I mean, the African Union has this convention, the Malabo Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. So, and I really would like to insist a lot about the data protection, cybersecurity, especially now that our children are 24/7 on the internet. So not just any cybersecurity, especially for children. So this year in our work, we are focusing a lot. Though over the past 3 years, we have been working with our member states on cybersecurity in general to ensure that our countries have the national capacities for when it comes to cybersecurity. But this year, we are focusing on cybersecurity and safety of children online. You know that there are many things that happen online, lots of opportunities, but you also want to make sure that no one or nothing, no harm, you know, reaches, especially our children when it comes to their use full time because of the education that turned mostly online now. So cybersecurity for us is a flagship, what we call a flagship project. The African Union is one of the top priorities of the African Union. Where we still have a problem is the personal data protection and how to deal with it. And this is what we also this year try to help our countries do is now that we are moving and within the continent, many of our countries started and we are gradually moving into digital IDs when we are also going into increasingly into e-commerce and online transactions, especially with the African Free Trade Area. You want to make sure also that the personal data protected, our data is protected, but not only protected, it's Africa owned. And not all countries within Africa have the capacity to deal with that or to address that or know how to do it. And that is why, as I said, one of the main focuses in our work program, especially this year, it was always been there, but this year we are putting a lot of emphasis on data protection, on also the issue of regional continental data and how to make that work for Africa, especially that data also, and that's another completely different, how would I say, discussion. The issue of data and big data and how to make it work for the economies, for the services, for the production, and for innovation. That's a completely different discussion. But again, I cannot pretend that it's only very few countries within the continent that have started engaging into a data economy and the data serious data discussion. So it is deserving from us all the attention, and we are working hand in hand with our Smart Africa. I don't know if you know about our Smart Africa initiative. Again, it's a high level initiative under the African Union, led by it's a presidential initiative and led by President Kagame of Rwanda. So again, so many things are happening on the continent in that sense. But as you rightly said, cybersecurity is is the other flip of the coin that deserves from us all attention. And I thought about Africa, but also knowing that cyber threats know no borders. So in that sense, we also are having lots of collaboration and across the world, because it's not a threat that necessarily comes or is working, you know, or recognizes any such thing as borders. So we want to make sure that, and there's a global effort, and I'm really happy that Ms. Bururo she's on the United Nations high level, because this is something that we discussed also with the Secretary General of the United Nations, how to make sure that cybersecurity works for all of us and that there's an international collaboration, a strong collaboration in the area of cybersecurity.
Thank you so much for putting this emphasis. And I would like to mention that the big question we have is when defining the agenda, who sets the agenda drives the process. We know this. And you are right. Who owns the data, yeah, drives the process. And no one in developing countries and Africa will not be in the driving seat of its digital transformation if nothing happens in relation to the ownership of the data, which is at the core. And certainly from there, you derivate all these issues related to data privacy, to regulations, to better use. Thank you so much. Let's listen again from Dr. Kenewendo. How do you see the role of African innovation ecosystem? And we heard from South Africa already on innovation development instruments like Innovation Hub, and I was very impressed to hear of African continental-wide networks that are happening. But innovation hubs or science and technology parks supporting the digitalization of the African industry. Can you elaborate on that kindly?
Thank you very much. Before I jump on the soft innovation and soft infrastructure, I just want to touch a little bit on finance in this development, because I think, yes, at individual country level, you know, macroeconomics works. Again, we're not a homogeneous group, but I think there is a special opportunity for us, again, through the AFCFTA, the second level, to really focus on that protocol on investment and focus on how we're going to drive back capital, even our capital that fled back into the continent. And that really means strengthening governance issues. It means strengthening our banking systems, strengthening governance and legislative issues to ensure that capital feels safe in the continent and helps to drive the developments that we want. So the first step that we have taken towards implementing the AFCFTA is great. Now we want to see more movement on the second level, on phase 2 of the AFCFTA, that now deals not only with the protocol on investment, but also on IP. Because when we start talking about digitization, then we're talking about innovation that needs to be protected. And that is still an area that is so weak in the continent, and we need to work on that. And it brings me to this issue around how our innovation hubs and science parks and so forth can assist in driving this digital transformation in the continent. But first and foremost, I just want to clarify and demystify that innovation hubs are not gigantic buildings, buildings that we need to spend millions of dollars on. Really, it can also be just simple structures that provide the right ecosystem for the development of products. It doesn't have to be multi-million-dollar buildings. And I have seen so many African countries really go down the rabbit hole with building massive buildings and losing millions that could have been invested in the MSMEs that are in desperate need of capital at this time. So there is a real opportunity here for hubs to provide a more nurturing environment for entrepreneurs, but most importantly, provide sandboxes, so an opportunity to interact with the more established businesses and those that are starting. And the sandboxes provide that opportunity of even disrupting from within businesses. And we've seen, for example, Barclays runs innovation hubs, and that's because they want, they want to, Barclays in the UK and ABSA here in the continent, they want to disrupt from within. And I believe that that is one of the ways that really we should start to see innovation. We should start to nurture innovation and the culture of startups in the continent. And soft innovation really capacity consists of those programs, the resources, tech hubs, tech parks, training resources, which are so important, because sometimes we focus on the building and we forget on training the athletes. I remember we invited one venture capitalist who was on a couple of years ago, and he aptly put it, when you want to have the best team play at the World Cup, Do you focus on building them the best stadium with the best pitch, or do you focus on building the actual team that will go and play at the World Cup? And we have focused more on the stadiums and have not focused more on the teams, on the players, investing in that training, in the mentorship, skills, experience, knowledge, providing knowledge resources to them in order for them to compete. And we have an opportunity as the continent, and I can't stress this enough, we have watched Europe lag behind the US. And there is so much data, so much research that has been done on why is it that the Silicon Valley model has not translated in Europe. And we have been said that we are lagging behind Europe, we are lagging behind Asia. Let us learn on why it is that those were lagging behind the US. What are the lessons that we can take and leapfrog from those and not follow through them? And one of the issues is really fiscal. It's fiscal. What are the taxes? How are we providing financing? It is about the environment that we are providing. And we have seen the question of, are you willing to be the main risk taker? Are you willing to be the main financier for those projects? And when I was minister, I challenged our DFI to really start financing digital products and innovation products. Even though they are so risky, they have no collateral, but we know that out of 100 innovative businesses, maybe only 10 of them will work. So it's a 10% risk in order, it's a 90% risk in order for us to find unicorns that can transform our continent. We will not see the transformation if we're not willing to take on the risk. Thank you.
If I may just add maybe a small comment. I very much appreciated this intervention, but I wanted to add something. I mean, when it comes to finance, I see your point regarding finance, and it's very spot on. Where maybe there's a nuance is that it's not, and I do not see it coming from the ministers' meeting or from the government's convening, especially this economy. I mean, I think what is requested is for our governments and the policymakers to just create the enabling environment, because there are now very interesting new modes of finance, including crowdfunding and so on, and people are willing and they are engaging in it and we are seeing it. It's just that it is shy and it's not. They are defying so many odds for that to happen. So I think what is requested is not even banks. And honestly speaking, I do not see banks, engaging into this small medium enterprises, the tech enterprises. They are mammoth. They're becoming like dinosaurs now, and they are not. I don't think they are fit for that purpose. And banks are disappearing. Banking is not disappearing, but banks are disappearing anyway. So, and they're disappearing very fast. And by the way, across the continent, we see fintechs. They are taking over so many things. So I think what is required is just the enabling environment, and for this, the policies and the regulations to understand that the landscape has changed for good. And that's what I keep saying. They have changed for good. There is no 2019 is finished, and that world is finished. So if you have a message to convey to the ministers of finance meeting, is that how they are creating this enabling policy and environment for all these new ideas to grow and flourish. And we are not growing, and no one is asking for government funding for these initiatives or the SMEs or so. There are mechanisms, thanks to digitalization, that allow for this finance and funding to happen. So if I have one message, and I think I'm complimenting what you said, it was not really a contradiction, but slightly different angle or an additional angle to have this message to our ministers of finance. Please make sure that the policies are adapted to this new economy, because it is not working the way it's not going to work the way it has been working in 2019. That's a world that is bygone, and advance to that, because the new world is offering much more opportunities for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Moderator, I I would like to chime in because Excellency is making great points. And you know, I like that she says this is not 2019, and it's so interesting that 2018, 2019, when we were doing the report on digital cooperation, so many African countries did not want to discuss it on this conversation, you know. And you remember just maybe 2 years before that at the WTO ministerial conference, there was also this discussion e-commerce and the digital economy, and very few of us wanted to engage. And I think at the time only Nigeria wanted to engage in this conversation. And I am so pleased to see that there is movement in this space, because denying digital economies really is just going to leave Africa behind. And I have also tried to make it so clear that digital transformation isn't only about you know, AI, isn't only about the robotics, but it's also about making our current markets more efficient, bringing in those markets that have been left outside into the mainstream economy. And I am so passionate about our indigenous economies, because I think our indigenous products, if they met with technology of now, those products would be so well marketable, exported, and would put Africa on the map.
So thank you so much. I would not paraphrase so many good ideas here. I am tempted to become a panelist and discuss with you, but I will refrain. I would rather take the last minutes we have, 1 or 2 minutes for a last word from each of you. Dr. Abu Said, what would be, you mentioned already what is one of your takeaways, but give us your last takeaway, and then we will hear also in this regard from Ms. Kenewendo.
It's not my last takeaway. It's again one additional shining example coming from Africa. I mean, and it's because only less than a month ago the African Union elections have taken place, and I'm really proud to see that the elections of the African Union are the first in the world blockchain secured online elections in any international organization that ever happened in history. So yet again, Africa is making history in the digital economy, and I thank you.
So
from my side is really to encourage the ministers of finance and the policymakers to really feel the sense of urgency in the need for digital transformation. And I don't know if it's right for me to thank COVID for putting us here, but it is so important that we do not miss out on this opportunity, that we're not just focusing on the high level, which we're talking about, but we also go down to the grassroots and are investing in human capital, in the young people right now, transforming their skills, because right now our graduates are not meeting the world that we aspire to have. They are not going to meet the jobs that we want to have. So as we work on policy planning, because it's Ministry of Finance and Development and Planning, as we work on planning, we should plan for economies that we want to have, not economies that we currently have. And I have heard President Kagame say this before, that what makes Rwanda tick is the fact that he runs it like the aspirational country that he wants, not the country that he currently has. And that makes such a big difference, because you think about the future, where your 10-year-olds will be and the kind of country that you want to bequeath to them. And I think that is a very important aspect of it. And then lastly, please back up your ambitions. We are all talk now, and I love it that we're already talking about digital transformation, but let us back up these ambitions of digital transformation with capital and with policy reform. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Moderator, if I just may something, sure. I would like us also to acknowledge the many very valuable comments that came in the chat box. I went through them all. Unfortunately, the time is not allowing for us. I mean, the fellow panel, I mean, the panel to address them. But I think many of the points that were raised in the chat box have been in a way addressed by us directly or indirectly, whether it's rural areas, whether it's innovative funding and innovative banking, or that made the policy work for everybody. I think some of these or many of these things have been mentioned in our interventions, but sorry that we would not, I acknowledge them, but we did not have the time to go through them in detail. Thank you.
Certainly, and when we thought it's a panel that we have early morning, I was a bit afraid, but this was so lively and so lively from you, so lively from the audience. And yes, we will have to find a way to address some of these issues. But I thank you so much, and time is of essence. But I think that Africa is moving also. So we think that it is important, and I have enjoyed so much because I face the same problems, and I have followed the discussion in Geneva that a few years ago I tried to initiate this discussion. I tried to put a side event on the 4IR, and they told me, no, the African countries, if the delegations are not interested in Geneva. And I still face many colleagues, even in my organization, that tell me, no, digitalization is too early. Let's focus on more traditional matters. Thank you so much for your passion. Thank you so much for this panel. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you very much once again to our moderator and also to our distinguished panelists for a very interesting discussion, and to our audience. As mentioned by Her Excellency, we indeed had a very lively and interesting discussion through our chat function. We're very sorry the time didn't allow us to reply to your comments, but we will continue our engagement through email. I would like to invite you once again to stay connected for the coming side events within the framework of the 53rd session of the Conference of African Ministers of Finance Planning and Economic Development. Please continue also the conversation online through our social media channels. And with this, I would like to officially close the session. Thank you very much once again, and we wish you all a very nice day. Thank you.